Here's how gambling rewires your brain. You start out thinking it's just about the money, but the longer you play, the more you realize it's really just about the emotion. And I'm going to tell you how I turned a $3,000 deposit into about $500,000 over 10 days. Before I get there, make sure you subscribe because what I'm about to share is going to completely change how you think about gambling. All right, so let's start simple. Let's say you go to the casino with $1,000 and you turn that $1,000 into $1,900 in 20 minutes. So it's a really great run in a short amount of time. And at that point, you should probably just walk away, but you're on a heater, so you don't, right? I mean, again, right? Who likes doubling their money almost in 20 minutes? And you decide to keep playing, and an hour later, you're down to $1,200. But you're pissed because your brain set a new baseline at $1,900. Again, you're up $200 and you're actually mad about it. Make it make sense. Conversely, let's say you start with the same $1,000 and you start out losing every hand. You get down to your last $100 and you probably should have walked away before that, but for whatever reason you decide to stick around and you turn that $100 into $800. And you are the happiest man in the world. You feel like you beat the system, but the crazy part is you're actually down money. So in scenario 1, you're up 200, but you're pissed off. And in scenario 2, you're down 200, but you're actually happy. That is how gambling psychology works and rewires your brain. And that's exactly what happened to me on a much bigger scale. So here's how I turned $3,000 into over $500,000 in about 10 days. And it wasn't from hitting some crazy parlays or some future bets cashing out or anything along those lines. It was just sides and totals. It was like I was seeing the board like never before. I will never, ever be betting again, but that was the single greatest run I've ever had. And the crazy part is it also led to me quitting. So I got into this phase where I was betting on anything and everything. So on this run, I'm talking any type of soccer league I could find. And where I really went on the major run was betting on like European basketball. So what I would do is take these first quarter over-unders, and then I would convince myself that, okay, I know this game, like I can read it like the back of my hand. So now I'm doubling down on the second quarter and third quarter and so on. And at any given point, I was having like 6 or 7 live bets. I shouldn't have said 6 or 7. Everyone's going to hate that. But whatever. Anyways, so it was just an unreal run. And I, again, would be betting from sun up to sundown. Like, it was not a fun 10-day period, even though I was winning. Because here's the thing. I knew I was down ultimately. And I knew what was going to happen. I was going to lose it. I knew that streak would run out. And I remember sitting there thinking like, all right, I need to go tell my buddy about this and hand him my phone so that he can change the password and lock me out. And that way I couldn't bet because I guess at that time I wasn't strong enough to self-ban or do a cool-off period or anything like that. But I knew what was going to happen if I didn't. So I ended up saying, all right, I'm going to wait. You know, I can make it through the night and not lose all of that. That's insane, right? But I guess as, you know, every gambler knows, you think the heater's never going to end, even though in the back of your head, you know it will at some point. So I figured I'll just make one more big bet and then shut it down. And this is another game that I'll never forget. I took the under in the Bucks versus Hornets. And I know... Like, I remember this so vividly staring at the DraftKings screen on should I buy the half point just for safety. Now, yeah, I've done that before and all of that, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't matter. But in my head, I was like, screw it. If I lose this, I still have a good chunk of change. And tip-off happens, and it's one of those games where it was like a 70-point first quarter. And halftime, we're like 60% of the way there. So it was dead in the water from the tip. And you know how that goes too. When one of your bets is like a blowout or totally dead, you kind of hate watch it and follow and check the score app updates, and you're just like, God damn, like you're just so mad at yourself. And then we get to the fourth quarter and it's kind of a blowout. So a lot of the starters are coming out And it was also one of those fourth quarters, if you ever bet on NBA games, where there's just like no points being scored. So now this bet's starting to come alive, and actually I remember getting a cash out option where I could have gotten a good chunk of it back. And I'm thinking, like, should I do it? I know everybody's been through that scenario. Should I or should I not? And it always feels like whenever you cash out, the bet ends up winning. And when you don't cash out, it ends up losing. So I decided to let it ride. And now it's actually looking like it's going to hit. Like, I had a little bit of a buffer with a couple minutes left. And we get to the final 45 seconds. And of course, freaking Malik Beasley, the guy betting on games, decides to score like 6 or 8 points in the final minute or something like that. Like, he hit 2 meaningless threes within the last 45 seconds of the game. I know that for sure. And the crazy part is, you probably guessed it, the game lost by the hook. If I would have bought that half point, I would have pushed. So I was freaking livid. And like a normal sane person would do, they probably would have called it a night, cashed out. Damn. That's all just coming back to me in real time. I haven't thought about this in a while. I kept betting, and that turned into about $50,000 off of over $500,000. So imagine that over a 12-hour period, the massive swings. And again, like any sane person, all right, well, you got 50 grand to play with, so let's take a beat here and step back. And of course, my dumbass didn't. And I was so pissed off about not buying the hook on that I decided to do a 2-team parlay and threw the whole thing on it. And it hit. By the way, one other thing that I need to add, like, I know you're not supposed to talk about dollar value and whatnot when it comes to recovery and betting, because $100 to me might be nothing and $100 to you might be everything. I guess I just feel like sharing it because it was such an unreal story. And so again, the parlay hit. I think there was like 150 off of it, or 175, somewhere around there. And again, I should have called it a night. I mean, it's probably like midnight at this point anyways, but nope, I kept betting, lost a little bit of it. I go to work the next day thinking like, all right, I need to tell my buddy, like, this is a lot of money. But here's the thing, in the back of my head, I knew I was down still overall, so I couldn't stop. I couldn't tell my buddy about it. I didn't want him to know. And by noon that day, completely gone. So to recap that is $3,000 into $500,000 in 10 days, and it was gone in 24 hours roughly. And that is the psychology of gambling in a nutshell. You think you're addicted to winning, but you're really addicted to the chaos and the dopamine and the whole nine. I mean, again, looking back on it, like, that wasn't even an enjoyable experience to go on that run because it was so stressful. And again, I knew I was down still. And then you eventually just become numb during that phase. So I didn't care about throwing a freaking parlay in like that. I just did it. And again, that's why gamblers can go up really, really big and be pissed off, and they can go down and climb back and be super happy, but they ultimately know they're down overall. If you relate to this story, or if it sounds familiar at all, this is what gambling addiction looks like to a T. I've got plenty of stories like this, although I don't have crazy swings like that, but make sure you subscribe. I'll keep sharing more about it.